Hello, everyone. I'm Cherry from the Audience Department of the Asian Civilizations Museum. I hope you're having a great day so far and staying safe. We are going live soon with Conversations program, Art and Accessibility. We will be starting at 3 p.m., which is in about 5 minutes. In the meantime, say hi and tell us where you are from in the comment section. See you later. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Conversations, Art and Accessibility. This is second installment of the Asian Civilizations Museum's bi-monthly online series on informal talks on arts-related topics. We welcome your comments or questions. Please post them in the comment section and we will share some of them with everyone. Hi, I'm Cherry Tian, Senior Manager in the Audience Department, and I am leading the access team at the ACM. I'll be your moderator today. With me, I have my fellow ACM colleagues, Chingy and Tara, who are working very hard to manage everything at the back end to make sure everything runs smoothly. So some of you may have read about the survey conducted by the Sunday Times in June this year that asked people what the essential jobs are within the context of a pandemic. Now, 71% of the respondents in Singapore ranked artists as the number one non-essential job, ahead of telemarketers and PR specialists and business consultants. Now, it was unclear how the survey actually defined artists, but local artists here obviously beg to differ because they pointed out that while we were all staying home during circuit breaker, we were watching more TV dramas, listening to music, reading more books. So clearly the arts do matter to a certain segment of society. If we take the view that art is important, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, we can ask ourselves what broader needs can art meet in the community. So today specifically, we hope to uncover the roles of art and culture in improving the lives of persons with disabilities and seniors with dementia. We have an interesting panel of speakers who will share their perspectives with us. So hello everyone, welcome and thank you for being here. Could you please give a short introduction about yourself, what you do, and profile of the main audience that you work with? Maybe we can start with Kwek Bin, please.
Okay, so hi, I'm Kwek Bin. I'm staff at Singapore Association of the Visually Handicapped. So as the name already suggests, our target audience are the visually impaired, so people who have problems seeing, up to the totally blind. Okay, so at SAVH, I have two portfolios. One is essentially the IT trainer for the visually impaired, where I teach visually impaired how to use smartphones and computers together with assistive technology. I have this other portfolio, which is advocacy, whereby I talk to different external parties who are interested to essentially help make the world a better place for visually impaired, which is sort of why I'm here today. So, oh yeah, by the way, I'm also visually impaired myself. So thanks for having me and glad to be here.
Thank you, Kwek Bin. Next we have Clara from SPD.
Hi everyone, I'm Clara. I'm program head for the Day Activity Center at SPD, and SPD serves many people with disabilities of different age range and different types of disabilities. And the Activity Center is like one of the 20 different programs that we have. So I'm very happy to be here, and maybe I'll just give a little bit more description about what kind of clients the Day Activity Center serves. And so we serve adults, so 18 years and above, with moderate to severe disabilities with care needs. So care needs means maybe some help is needed in toileting, in eating. Yeah. And the average age of our clients is about 30 plus years old, although we do have some clients with autism who are slightly younger, around 18 plus to early 20s. And our clients are here in the morning and afternoon and go home to be with their families in the evening. And when we talk about this group of clients, because they are on the more severe end of this disability spectrum, our goals for them is more to be meaningfully engaged in their lives, to decrease their dependence on others, and also to provide a time of respite for their caregivers. So not so much like a vocational goal, but more of an engagement goal. Yeah.
Thank you, Clara. Next we have Dr. Esther Joseph.
Hi, thank you, Sherry, for inviting me. Sorry for my voice. I am the founder of an organization that started with a focus on the arts, and my journey really started 32 years ago in Singapore when I married my Singaporean husband. It evolves around the arts to see what an essential feature it is. I don't only work with people with disabilities. I work across the board. I work with families. I work as advocacy. I work as a curator. I work as an educator. I work as a researcher. It's about providing a voice for the arts as essential as being, and not to make the mistake that engagement in the arts leads up to being an artist, but that the arts is an essential part of our living and being and where we are going to. So yeah, and maybe throughout this session, it will become more clear about what it's all about. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Esther. Next, we have Suchin.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us at this panel. So my name is Suchin, and I work mainly as an art therapist, but at the same time, I'm also an artist and an art educator as well. So I guess we all wear many different hats, right? But the main profile of the audience that I work with, I provide art therapy services for a lot of elderly patients with dementia. But at the same time, I also run a lot of community art projects with the general public seniors.
Thank you, Zuchin. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you have questions or comments, especially to our panelists, do put them in the comments. And if we have time, we will put them up and ask everybody to answer your questions. Thank you. So, we have our first questions to the panels. It is actually a broad one. How do the arts play a role in improving one's well-being or shaping lives? Clara, how does SPD view art programs?
Okay, so I think SPD views art programs as a very integral tool to achieve many different goals with our clients. So, for example, in the Day Activity Center, we focus a lot on helping the clients to gain things like fine motor skills and daily living skills, like right now, hand hygiene. So, fine motor skills, when the clients draw, they paint, they sponge stamp different shapes and colors, they are practicing. They're practicing their skills. And when we want to teach clients on hand hygiene, we can ask them to cut out soap dispensers and color them and stick like hands on them to remind them and help them remember like the lessons that we are trying to teach them. And another way that we find that art is very useful is to help our clients engage in cultural activities that are happening around us. So, for example, Hari Raya just passed. And when we talked about a celebration like that, we will also print out little things to help them to relate to the celebrations. So, for Hari Raya, I think we printed out some ketupats and we encourage the clients to color and then cut it out and then we'll display it in our center. And the clients really like that. So and we're very happy for that too. And I guess two more things. One would be we do use art for a lot of things. So just gonna share like maybe two more. One would be that we want the clients to experience a holistic Singaporean life. So in addition to bringing them out to places like markets, shopping malls, or to the libraries, we also want them to visit common spaces in Singapore like museums, spaces where they see the culture, other parts of the culture of Singapore. Yeah, and I guess the most important is that we use art to let them express themselves and let them have an opportunity to gain confidence when they use art to give back to those around them. So what I mean by this is, for example, the clients, they will actually ask, like, hey, I know so and so other client in the center has their birthday coming up. Can I draw a birthday card for them? And we'll be very happy to provide the materials. We'll help them to spell how do you spell birthday. Okay, we'll spell it with them, and then they will decorate, and they really like it. So we encourage that. And another way that they express themselves and give back to those around them is our clients' artwork has also been used and showcased in some of SPD's products. For example, very recently we had a client's design that was printed on a tote bag and sold by some Youth for Causes students to raise funds for SPD. So these students, they come in, they're just studying, but they decided to adopt SPD as a beneficiary. And our clients were the things that they've done in the center. We asked them, and they were happy to share it to with the students so that they can raise funds, and that comes back to us. And yeah, that's one way that we see the clients enjoying art and using it in their daily lives.
Thank you, Clara. I think that's very sweet. And I think it seems like art can also be used to present very difficult concepts visually and making them more easy to understand. So, Dr. Esther, you designed the standards for the visual arts in special education and set up art curriculum for special needs school, and you guide teachers to set up community of practice and work with children with disabilities. Could you share some of your experience with us and why you think art is important, please?
Well, I think we have to go to the root of why the art is important. So, the arts is the very first form of visual communication. It precedes writing. So, the arts is much more ancient than writing. It existed 40,000 years before actually we had a formal written language. Um, so we have to see that if we go back to the roots, to that essential form of communication, we see how vital the arts are in allowing us to learn about each other's lives and giving insights into each other's lives with very different symbols than we use for reading and writing, which are, all the different alphabets we have in the world. So people give voice through the arts and they interpret through the arts. And people with disabilities, the ones who I've worked with, and I actually did my PhD in Singapore on a group of young adults with Down syndrome, they have an amazing way of living. So we get an insight in what their life is all about. So you position yourself in, if I learn another person's language, how rich will I become? So it's like learning the language of others. So my vision is really connecting communities through culture and creativity. Because if we truly want to be inclusive, we have to learn that person's language. The same happened, when I went to India and I worked with people in Tamil Nadu. I didn't speak their language, they didn't speak my language, but we had that common language of the arts. And in those moments, and when reaching out to the mothers before I reached out to the children, there was this immense communication going on about empowerment, about who you are, about self-identity, about agency. These people became stakeholders of the world rather than marginalized. Now that is what I believe the arts is all about. And so we have to look much more bigger, broader, why we do art. It is not, to me, about an economic benefit, but the same as what you learn maths. You don't learn maths to be a mathematician. I will never be a good accountant, so I've learned maths. But we learn language in school, but not everybody is a writer, an author. When you do art, not everybody will be an artist, but everybody can express. Everybody needs to learn to read and write. Everybody needs to learn maths. So I believe that arts is essential in our way of living, because that reaches the emotions, the hand and the heart. And so that is what it's all about.
Thank you, Dr. Esther. I like what you mentioned about art is being like a universal language as well. And art is also like a doorway, a gateway to understand another person in a very deeper level. So thank you for that. Well, we have talked about how adults and children with disabilities benefit from art education. So I'm wondering, Suchin, from the aspect of art therapy, how can art help seniors with dementia? I think many people, for instance, would say that people who have dementia are not responsive to art just because of their health condition. What do you think about that?
I actually disagree with that because I think in my work with a lot of elderly patients with dementia, I've noticed that creativity can still emerge in persons with dementia. And I think art making can excite the imagination, which can even be intact during the later stages of dementia. I think, as Dr. Esther was saying, it's this idea that it's a very primary mode of communication. And when you look at the disease process for dementia, a lot of the recent memories are the ones that are cut off. And, so a lot of things but things like imagination, they are actually still quite intact. And, art can actually, yeah, absolutely, right. And I think art can also promote relaxation. It can improve mood. And more importantly, it's a vehicle for expression without words, right? And you can use it for things like intergenerational bonding between family members during the art making as well.
Thank you. I think what you mentioned about creativity remain intact. I think this is a very good reminder. If you have someone at home who has dementia, we want you to think that there is still creativity. There are still ways for them to express through art. That was a very good point.
Yeah.
Bean, I have a question. Sorry, yes?
And can I just step in? Because our
Yes, please.
senses are the last ones that remain active, and our senses are the primary modes of communication with our environment. So we are neglecting it currently. So I love what Suchin said about it, the vision. So we have to actually go back and see what connects our communities with the environment. And let's not denigrate it and say, oh, this is childish. No, it is that immense stimulation of the senses.
That was a very good point. Yeah.
And it's definitely something that even people with maybe limited verbal capacity can still use to express themselves. So I have some clients who they don't really speak, but they draw, and you know what they want to say through that.
Hmm. Yeah, so indeed, and sometimes also we heard people talk about this general perceptions about art being like a visual experience. So maybe I could ask Kwek Min to share a little bit about how SCVH uses art in the Center for the Visual Impairment Community.
So first of all, yeah, as is the idea. A lot of people think that art is visual, but then that doesn't really stop people who are visually impaired from wanting to access, enjoy, even create art. So you would find, as I talked, that a lot of the themes mentioned by the previous speakers do come out even when we're talking about the visually impaired. So at SVH, we do have an art program where basically our visually impaired are matched with sighted, right, volunteers with normal eyesight. In fact, this program is led by someone who is visually impaired herself, right? So basically, the visually impaired will be sitting together with the volunteers, and the volunteers will assist them with the creation of art. So it could be like passing them the materials, guiding them to uh, paint, or guiding them to paste the materials in various ways to create the art form. And then you will notice that in the process of creating art, so there are different kinds of art. So there is the cutting kind of arts and craft. There is a painting arts and craft for people with a certain amount of residual vision. There is all the other types of art, which could be like pottery, even simple things like beading, making of handicrafts. So all this, I think, they are the broad definition of arts, and these are all things which visually impaired can also engage in. With Could be with help from volunteers, could be on your own, even if they do have the potential talent for this. And so you notice that for us, touch art, okay, as the program is called, does fulfill a range of purposes. So basically, once the arts and crafts are created, they are sold to generate a small amount of income. So, but then the keyword is small. So actually, the income part is not so much the main purpose. So there's some income to the people who create the art. There's a little bit of income to the association. But then there is also the perhaps a more higher level benefits, which are, as already have been mentioned, there is a sort of therapeutic element to the creation of the art. So for people who enjoy art making, the process is enjoyable, is therapeutic. You do build a sense of confidence. There's this sense of empowerment because you're able to create something, even though you're visually impaired. And there's a public education element to it. So once you have the arts and crafts get sold out to the general public. There's awareness raised among the general public of the existence of visually impaired. There is potentially the chance for the general public to appreciate that the visually impaired then are still able to do things, and the visually impaired are also able to contribute to society. Like for example, in this the recent National Day goodie bags, the designs on the tote bags. So a couple of the designs were contributed by our visually impaired clients as well. So you do find that the arts and crafts can fulfill a lot more than what a lot of people might typically imagine for visually impaired.
Thank you, Kwek Min. And hear that art is so important. You know, it actually serves many different purposes for different groups of peoples. But now let's go into different questions now. How do you see museums playing a part in facilitating learning and making art accessible? Maybe Suchin, you want to share with us?
Okay, I guess based on what I know, currently art therapists in hospitals and nursing homes, they've taken their seniors to the museum, usually for an outing or an excursion, right? And for participants and their family members to bond, and learn about local art in relation to self, they get them to stimulate conversation and discussions at the same time, by kind of combining that with art making, right? Now, what I've noticed about these are that they are usually maybe like one-off or kind of ad hoc visits. And I think, my hope is that, that it will be kind of good to work with museums to develop a more regular, long-term and perhaps more sustainable program.
Thank you for sharing that. If you are working to our audience listening now, if you are from the museum, to take these suggestions as well and have a thought about it. Suchin, I have another question too. Like you have just mentioned about programs done by art therapists in the museum. Have you seen any good regular art program co-developed by museums and art therapy so far?
Yeah, actually, in kind of my research, I've kind of chanced upon one of the art therapy programs in the Ben Uri Gallery and Museum. So this is actually in the UK, right? So they have this called Starting with Art Therapy program, and it's actually facilitated by a trainee art therapist. So their objective, one of the main objectives of the gallery collection, is to improve the quality of life for participants, right? So while the gallery also runs some of these workshops, some of these discussion sessions, their art therapy program focuses on using the arts for the participants to communicate their inner experiences, okay, through which then the participants can then form and make connections with one another. So in this particular art therapy group, people, will share their joys, they will communicate their challenges, they will explore the narratives that they encounter while going through the gallery reproductions. So that's kind of what you see in the slide that's being put up. So, they kind of visit the museum and they kind of discuss these narratives that they encounter. And then the images themselves, are means to articulate these emotions, right? So the artworks, in art therapy, we use a lot of metaphors, and we think of these artworks as containers for feelings. Okay, and they support these participants who are in the program to explore some of these more difficult emotions, from a distance. So you are safe, okay. But in the program, over several sessions, the art therapists worked alongside other healthcare professionals to set some of these therapeutic goals, okay, in line with some of the individual needs, and then created this safe and confidential space for sharing. And in some instances, the art therapists also supported these participants to be actively involved in the group without actually making art. So they can kind of observe, okay, but while others kind of make art. So it's kind of created this shared space, shared safe space.
Thank you. It sounds like a very good collaborations. I think personally, a museum is actually a safe and quiet place for personal contemplation, reflections, and building one's your own personal narratives. You mentioned that example in UK. Maybe we also can talk about an example in Singapore. I think a couple of years ago in 2018, the Peranakan Museum, which is a sister institution of the Asian Civilizations Museum, we partner with the Alzheimer's Disease Associations. We work with seniors with dementia. We invited them to the museum. They took photographs of the objects around the museum. And they also get to dress in Peranakan attire. There you go, it's so pretty. And they have their portraits taken by professional photographers. I think what is more important is that after that, the photos that they have taken, we exhibited on a digital platform. So we let the kind of communication continues, to engage with public education. Like what Kwek Bin mentioned earlier, there is always a public education aspect to the programs that we are doing as well. Yeah, and Clara, I think maybe we want to hear from you also from the SPD point of view. SPD organize many field trips quite regularly, especially before COVID-19. Why do you think it's important for your clients to visit places like museums?
I think there are three different aspects to this. And the first one is definitely that because the clients like it. Yeah. So for example, last year around I think August, the clients went to ACM actually, and we went at a time where there was this special exhibit on Guo Pei and her fashion designs. I'm not sure if anyone else has seen. I think there was quite prominent. Like there were quite a lot of advertisements on I saw it at the MRT stations and things like that on Guopei. And when our clients went there, they really enjoyed the experience. They enjoyed actually going out to somewhere new. They enjoyed the aircon. They also enjoyed the spaciousness because ACM was very physically accessible. Most of the corridors were very wide, and they liked being able to move around, and we were comfortable with letting them move around because we felt that it was a very safe place. And they also like having the various hands-on activities provided by the museum. And I think I remember that there was one client in particular who was especially enthused about this outing because it was Guopei and it was about fashion, and she was actually very much involved in the fashion and art scene before she acquired her disability. So this is a person who previously did not have a disability. Later in her life, she acquired a disability. So through this an exhibition and through the activities that came out from this exhibition, she managed to talk to her volunteer a lot about what she was doing in the past. She shared a part of her life and one of very unique interests, and it makes me very happy to see this. And when she came back to the center, she told me all about it also, and just the smile on her face, it just really makes our day. Yeah, so that's one very important part because we go to the museums because the clients like it. The second one is also that we help to reinforce some learning of social norms in a natural setting. So we have some clients who have autism or intellectual disabilities and or all lah. And it makes it easier for them to learn and basically to learn what is a social norm and how we should be behaving when they're in the actual setting. So showing them slides about it or pictures about it might not be the best way. It might not be as effective as bringing them there and showing them that, okay, this is the space. Museums, there are parts that are quieter, there are parts that are dimmer. And in that part, we don't anyhow run around, we don't shout very loudly for our friends. We be quieter, we modulate our voice, and we modulate our behavior so that we don't disturb others in the museum. It's just a very simple example, but it takes time for them to learn, and it was a good opportunity for them to be in that setting and to learn directly. Yeah, so that's the second one. I had a third point, which was that I think going to the museums allow us to advocate for greater integration of people with disabilities into community spaces. So what I mean by this is that because we went to the museum, we everyone else can see that we're using them our clients on wheelchair can access the thing because they're ramps. The space is big enough for them to move, and we think that this is good to show everyone, like public members of the public, even the staff at museums, that hey, these are important, and we hope that museums through these museums can continue to ensure that the exhibition areas and their displays are always accessible to people with disabilities, not only in terms of physical space and ramps, but also maybe in the form of like audio and visual guides and maybe braille. I think maybe people like Quacklin might appreciate this also. Yeah. And I also talked a little bit about like staff, the ACM staff. We actually worked with them quite closely to come up with some materials to engage our clients after walking through the exhibits. And through these discussions with the museum staff, we managed to also agree not only the materials, and we also talked about a designated space because we knew that some of our clients with autism, they might need a cool down room or a cool down area just in case they're not feeling very happy or something triggered them or something, and it's best if we can have a quiet space for them. And we talked to the museum staff about it, and they were very happy to try and accommodate us, and for that we are happy. We are thankful for it. And I think this only happens when we have conversations, when we go there. I mean, if not, why would the museum staff, they might not know, I would think, maybe. Yeah, and maybe Cherry, you might have a different idea, but I think that from our side, we found it a good thing to be able to talk to to different people and share our experience with others. Yeah. And
Thank you. Thank you. I think you brought out a very important point about modulating behaviors, and I think how the public perceives what is acceptable in public spaces, especially places like libraries and museums. I think there are also people with non-visible disabilities, like what you just mentioned, people with autism and ADHD, who may not be able to modulate their behavior. So I think there are parents who wrote in and asked these questions as well, like how do we help their children with ADHD or autism to visit a museum. It is not a very simple question, I must say. For a few minutes to answer if we wanted to find a holistic approach, but maybe we can start this conversation nonetheless. I also want to ask the audience tuning in, if you have some thoughts about this, some ideas, please leave your comments in the sections, and we can all learn from each other as well. So I would like to ask Dr. Esther, what do you think that how could art institutions make public and families feel more welcomed in places like that? What are the ways to improve accessibility? I think Clara has mentioned about quiet room, what else do you think we could add on to that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things, but I think we have to start with the basic. That is the public perception of disability is it equals misbehavior. We have such a negative perception. So I would say if our community is open to people, then and have a more positive approach, so then we are already one step towards a solution. Now, the arts provide often, but not always, a unique platform for neurodiverse children. So we have to see, museums. Uh, they're great, but if I go all of a sudden to a museum and I'm not used to going to a museum, then the first question in my mind is, what am I doing here? So we need to really start looking deeper at the issue, to separate being an audience and active engagement. I saw some great examples that Suchin brought along, and about the active engagement, and what you also had in your museum. Large, unfamiliar, and unknown spaces are to everybody overwhelming, but especially to children do who are who cannot regulate those senses. Our senses are very powerful: our eyes, our ears, our skin. So if we have a sensory issue, those issues can just play along. So we have to start looking at that journey of creating a gradual access, and that needs to start. I did a research of a 1 year an artistic play, and I realized how much these children have to give to us if only we give them the space. But it was a gradual going bigger, wider, and in the schools where I work, I have an open-ended classroom, and it's kind of a regional experience which I intend to set up. But it really starts very slow, because if you're constantly used to sit down and I do, you do, and behavior control, then being in an open space just evokes a lot of things. So we have to be realistic. And if we make museums accessible, we have to have parents know what is going to happen in the spaces, and would we introduce all the spaces. Is the staff aware? Is the staff sensitive? Are there mini exhibitions you may want to start with, very small, in a small room? We had this amazing autistic artist in play, Dr. Dawn Joy Leong, and she created a Clemens space, which is a soothing space. So how would those things benefit? Then it starts at home, before you go. The arts is also something that needs to be treasured at home. So start with feeling a nice vase at home, and if you're scared, take a vase that can be broken, or so that what you can see what happens. read books about art, create that mini exhibition at home. I believe, Sherry, that you have with your museum already guidelines for what to do. So there is something for us to work on, and to start really in a broader discussion what can be done.
Thank you for sharing that. In fact, I think when you talk about being in a new, unfamiliar, large spaces with a lot of unexpected things that come your way, it does feel someone's senses could be very overwhelmed. And I personally would feel that going into a foreign place as well. And it's not just for people with non-visible disabilities. So I think one of the ways that we do it at ACM also, we provide social story and educational resources. For those who are not familiar with this term, social story, is actually pictorial with short captions and indicating what the children will be seeing upon stepping into the museum. Start from who you will be meeting, places you will be seeing, things you will hear. And this is like a little steps to prepare the children emotionally and mentally what they could be anticipating. I think this is something to also help to manage the expectation a little bit. And I think it also takes the whole community to come together to make our environment accessible and inclusive as well. And I like what you share about how do we quick to judge another person based on the behaviors. So I think this is a good start, and having a webinar like this, it does provide an opportunity to discuss issues and raise awareness, as well as respond to stereotypes and challenge perceptions. So I think I have questions to Kwek Bin now. I think when talking about museums being accessible, and you and your team of visual impairment community, you have helped the museum so much by providing useful feedbacks and recommendations to make the place accessible and inclusive. Maybe you could share some wish list with us.
So basically, museums are, well, not all visually impaired people will be into museums, but that's only insofar as even for the general public, not all people are into museums. But where you do have visually impaired who are keen to visit museums, and if you speak more broadly, to access arts and cultural activities, one of the major obstacles that we face is actually traveling to the venues. So your conventional model for museums and arts and cultural activities is they are housed in a physical location. And so the first thing to do is to travel there. But traveling is already quite a challenge for a lot of visually impaired. And even when you get to the venue itself, is even something as simple as trying to find the front entrance. So that could be a challenge for visually impaired. And once you finally do succeed in getting into the museum, I like this comment that Dr. Esther was saying, where you're not in the habit of getting to a museum, or once you're actually there, the first thing you ask yourself, what am I doing here? So for a visually impaired person, that also strikes a chord, although I think it's in a very different sense from the way she was using it. So if I can't see, I see very poorly or not at all. When I'm standing inside the museums, I have no idea where the exhibits are. I don't even know where to go. I don't know what's on exhibit. I can't go up front and touch it. That definitely is something I'll be asking myself. What am I doing in a museum where all the exhibits are to be seen and I can't see anything? So there are technology options whereby you can set up audio curation. You can set up precision geofencing technology so that as you move around, there's technology which will prompt you where to go, and when you get to the exhibit, there is some automatic playing of audio to describe the exhibits. So that's one option. In fact, actually, the most simple solution for a lot of places where the visually impaired have trouble moving to, for a lot of visually impaired, is just simply improve the lighting, right? So with better lighting, a lot of people with significant amount of residual vision will actually be able to move around on their own and do a lot of things. Of course, having said that, that's not quite feasible in a museum setting. And there are a lot of things to think about when you set up all the technology options. So having said that, within these limits, ACM as one of those activists who are actively taking museums to all the different parts of society, has done an admirable job in all its efforts to try and engage and then make museums meaningful to the visually impaired. So you have done things like trying to roll out large print so that people who are still able to read to some extent can read up on the exhibits when you're there, even to the extent of putting things up online. So that's one of the things which we're looking at, which we're looking forward to. And in fact, going beyond just print, so ACM recently launched its audio described tours, which is another great initiative, which was not even sparked by us, I think. Yeah, I think all your credit, right? So we were even discussing things like having 3D models of the exhibits printed out, so there's a guided tour of visually impaired groups to the different exhibits where we get to touch the models, because in the absence of sight, the touch will be the next most used sense when it comes to trying to appreciate relics, I guess. So there are a lot of these initiatives which ACM is making in collaboration with us to help make the arts museums more accessible to the visually impaired. So I think I'm also very appreciative of that.
Thank you, Kwek Ming, for sharing that. It's a very nice assurance and affirmation for the team who works very hard on this as well. And I think we wanted to create some things that more people could use. I think if a design is well thought of and considered the needs of others, we talk about universal design, how a design could serve a wider audience and not just limited to a group of community, regardless of disabilities or not. I think that would be a good starting point to have a conversations on that. I think we
Yes, I
have
would
some
like to add,
time.
basically,
Yes, please.
design which is universal, which is inclusive, which is not specifically targeted at a particular disability group, but works for everyone. That's the kind of design which is most sustainable, because everybody else will benefit from it. So there's even more motivation to implement it, and not just for the sake of one small group or society.
Yes, thank you so much. Oh, we have a comment coming in from Nicholas Chan. So Nicholas asked, how effective has showcasing disability art in museums helped shift public perception or acceptance towards the disabled community? Who would like to take this question?
I really like that question. Could I?
Yes, please.
Okay, Nicholas, thank you so much for that question, because museums have actually played a pivotal role in highlighting the plight of people with disabilities throughout the ages. It actually started where we found that people with disabilities in the ancient Mexican art were worshipped as gods, and in the 12th century, 3rd century, they became depicted as angels. And people are actually able to trace deformities through the arts. However, it was when photography came and everything in the 18th century that people with disabilities were pictured very much as different. Now they have to come and fight that status. So the problem is we like to see people with disabilities to make the same art as Vincent van Gogh, Rembrandt, or whatever artist, as long as it is the same as a famous artist. But why? Why can't we treasure their unique way of living, their unique way of seeing the world? They actually have so many solutions for us to give us to see from a new perspective. From that matter, I have to really appreciate SG Enable when they wrote me in for that project Fun Packs. That's actually also a display of art. And I worked with Kathy of the visual handicap. Kathy shows that you can have a vision without having a physical vision. So disabled people are giving us new ways and an introspection. So they build bridges, because one thing that is they have in common. Disability allows us to see things differently, work towards a different solution. The arts, if we put it together, allows cultural differences. I did last year an exhibition in Mexico for Down syndrome, and there was art from Bangladesh there. Now, it wasn't great art from this is actually Mexican art, and it is fantastic. But this is all what you see in Mexico. It's the sun, it's the center, it's all very centralized, and it allows us to see, does this have a relationship with India? Was there some relation last time? People see things that we forgot to see. They allow us to smell what we forgot to smell. They allow us to hear what we forgot to hear. So if we recognize the original, and I really want to repeat, the original art making of people with disabilities, then we can shift our perspectives. Then we can create a more holistic perspective. And I know Suchin, I really like what he mentioned. If we look at people with dementia, how much they still have to offer us, if we truly give them the modes and the means. So if we build those communities of practice, museums play a central role for all of us. And this is where I believe this community then brings everybody together. You start seeing how much, and also an audience like all of you have to offer, because it's only together we can. I think that's a slogan. What's the slogan for National Day? I can't, something like that.
Thank
Yes.
you. Thank you, Dr. Esther, for sharing that. It was a very good and powerful example. Nicholas
See, I
Chan, thank
wear
you
red.
for your question. Thank you. So we're going to move on to the next segment when we talk about digital technology now. So, accessibility to art and cultural institutions has become a real challenge during COVID-19 for all of us, actually. So we have to rethink our strategies to bring art to people digitally without physical contact. So I would like to also ask maybe Kwek Bin, so how do you continue to engage with the audience, during this time? And what sort of challenges and opportunities that came about when you use digital technologies?
I would like to say that, first of all, ironically, the pandemic pushing everything onto digital has actually made the arts and culture more accessible to the visually impaired, although that's like within certain conditions. So as I already just mentioned briefly, ACM has you have your audio described tours. So going digital means that I can access the museum exhibits from the comfort of my home without having to go through all the agony of trying to travel to a place and then traveling around a place where I can't see where I'm going. So that has actually made, so technology has been a great enabler in that sense. Although having said that, you do need the technology to be compatible with whatever we are using as visually impaired. So basically visually impaired, especially those with little or no sight, we need the assistive technology, which basically reads out everything to us on our smartphones, on our computers. So if the content is provided in a form which is not compatible with our technology, we can't read things out, we can't interact with the stuff. So luckily for audio described tours, that's in a format that's accessible to us. And another major platform, which is another like a lifesaver, godsend, whatever you want to call it, is Zoom, the platform. So we do have this potential, which we have been exploring, whereby you can conduct art classes using Zoom. So you do have participants. I was like fortunate enough to sit in as observer for one such somewhat experimental art class. Although I don't understand actually that this is not quite experimental for other people, right? As I think someone else will share. So in an art class on Zoom, the artist educator will have to, of course, pay more attention to watch the clients, our visually impaired people, right? So the visually impaired people connect through Zoom. So Zoom is one platform which is quite accessible. We can potentially, of course, not for everyone, but potentially we can independently operate Zoom so that we can link up and then join an art class on Zoom. So then with the camera aiming at us, the educator, the lead, the person who conducting the workshop can give instructions to the visually impaired so that we can position the cameras in the right way. Then the educator can give instructions, can help prompt. If we were to leave our art materials in a certain place, we're having trouble locating them, the teacher can tell us where the materials we're looking for is. Can be found. You do need, as an educator, as somebody communicating with a visually impaired, to give sufficiently graphic descriptions of what we need. So for example, you need to tell us that the stick of glue which we want to use to stick something on our vanguard. So the stick of glue is actually lying about 15 cm away from my left hand at the 11 o'clock direction. So if you didn't just say, oh, if you were to say something like, oh, the stick of glue is there, no, there, move your hand there, that isn't going to help at all. So you do need somebody who needs to know how to communicate. So hereby I'd like to highlight 2 points. So one is the technology. The technology needs to be compatible, accessible to the visually impaired. But also the other element of remote interactions is communication. I think there was that point mentioned earlier about arts, where art is a medium through which you can communicate without words. But quite paradoxically for us, the visually impaired, you must communicate with a more precise choice of words when it comes to allowing the visually impaired to practice arts. So because you need to describe sufficiently accurately and precisely so that we can do what we want to do. You need to, as I was giving the example about the glue, there's also like, you can guide the person how to manipulate the materials to create the art. So how to roll up the clay, maybe, some newspaper to stick on the vanguard, that kind of thing. So really, for us, making a lot of things accessible to us is really about potentially technology, but also there will always be this element of communication, the human interaction, how well it is done, how much thought and care is put into it.
Thank you, Kwebin, for highlighting that technology, if it's done and designed well, it would actually serve a greater purpose, right? There's this screen reader that you mentioned that will read out contents that was displayed on the screen. So I think for those who are developing contents, to take note of this functions in your smart device as well. Make sure that the forms, the contents that you put out, registration form especially, just to make sure that it can be read out by the device. We have a question.
There are like publicly available guidelines on how to code applications and websites so they are compatible with our technology. So anybody who is interested can take a look. Web accessibility guidelines, that kind of stuff.
Thank you. I think we have a question coming in from Ms. Alessandra. So her question would be, would it be helpful to create a technology that would allow visually impaired users to be able to recreate parts of a simplified version of the exhibition for them to touch, such as a pin impression? And her second part of the question is audio description of the art alone enough to aid the visually impaired? Thank you for your questions. Kwek Bing, would you like to answer this?
There have been attempts to create technology which can sort of replicate the tactile feel of objects, but I would say, the level of success is somewhat questionable, and the level of cost is even more questionable. So at the current stage of maturity of our technology, I think it might still be a way off. But yes, there's definitely something that a lot of us will be interested to see, and we are watching the space to see developments. As for the other one, audio description, yes, and admittedly, audio description sometimes will not work all the way. There are many factors to think about when you design audio description. There's like the visually impaired person's ability to understand the description. And of course, the person doing the description, you also have to think about how to describe things. And there are a lot of things which are difficult to describe verbally, no matter how well you can do it. But yes, like I was saying, so without this, what you have is trying to see something that you cannot see. So it's quite obviously a good next best alternative. Yeah.
Thank you, Kwek Bing. Thank you for sharing that. So when we talk about visual impairment using technology, now I would like to ask Suchin about how elderly uses technology for you to conduct art therapy when you cannot meet them physically. Did they encounter any challenges with technology?
Yes, I guess I'm going to talk about this on two very quick points. But in terms of my art therapy work, what I do is I actually try to adopt a blended approach of both having online and on-site sessions. So the online sessions, as Kwek Bin pointed out, I think Zoom has been an enabler. Okay, and so a lot of times I'm kind of guiding them or facilitating them through Zoom. Okay, and then we'll use digital tools, we'll use physical media, and so that's kind of a way to meet the challenge of not being able to meet them physically, right? And then on another note, one of the other projects that I was doing called Silver Good on Facebook. Okay, I got together with another collaborator to kind of generate content for seniors who are especially during the circuit breaker. And for them to kind of be engaged with. So with this, we kind of thought of the user experience, right? So kind of trying to see like on their end, what is easy for them to engage with, so like Facebook was kind of an easy means for both the volunteers to share their experiences and also for the seniors to go online to kind of view these clips, okay, and these were live as well, right? So yeah, I think some of these seniors might have been isolated during this period, and I guess that's why we wanted to curate this content that will be relevant to them. And that goes back to the question that the point that Dr. Esther brought up, that I think it's important to kind of explore all these different means, all these different modes, and then also have the space to kind of do that. So we've taken the circuit breaker to really test and try out all these different things.
Thank you, Suchin, for I think reminding us that actually there is a role of a caregiver as well to be alongside to help the seniors to do the therapy. I think similarly to what Kwek Bin has mentioned, so the role of caregiver is very important. So I think we have been talking about being on the receiving end for the people with disabilities and senior with dementia in the arts. So how do we think, or how have we seen any active contributors in the arts, from your perspective? Maybe Clara, you could help us to share some perspective on this. How do your clients been active contributor in the arts?
I think one of the one that comes to mind first is actually from another program, still under SPD, but from the shelter workshop side. We have a group of craftspeople with decades of experience doing craft work, really. They have their goals and they pursue and they hone like their skills in crafts, specifically like book binding, and actually their designs. Recently, we did a collaboration with Singapore Airlines, and actually their designs are on Chris Shop. So if you guys want to see, just doing a little bit of advertisement here, but if you guys want to see, this is really done by our craftspeople, people with disabilities. They are like 50, wait, not really, 60 plus now, or even older. They've worked to hone their craft, to bind it, to cut it, and some of these are like recycled materials. In our e-shop, we also have some that used to be like old wallpaper, and they recycle it and use it to do it, and then they put hot stamping molds. So I think there's a picture on that. To customize, so you can put your names on some of or whatever codes or whatever material things you want to say on the front page of your notebook to personalize it. And I think this is one way that I see people with disabilities just still giving back, contributing to society, and showing that through art, showing that they have their own goals, they have their own skills, they have their own aspirations. And the other one was the one I talked about way earlier, where I talked about some clients requesting time to draw birthday or festive cards, or actually even thank you cards when one staff leaves or moves to another department. And we tell them, they'll be like, oh, okay, let's, they will write notes and they will design, they will decorate, they will do things to show that they appreciate. And art is a very big way that they use to express themselves that way. to express their love, their care for others. So it's not just like receiving the care because the activity center, they do receive a lot of care, but they also give that back. They give us the love, they give us they show their concern and they express themselves. And I think this is just a very human way of contributing to society around us.
Thank you for sharing that. I like the product so much, and I think, ladies and gentlemen, I think it is always good to support local scene as well, especially in this way. You help to encourage one another, and especially given that you give them hope and aspiration and a goal to set out for. I think that is actually very powerful. I think we have very slowly coming to an end. I think I would just like to invite Dr. Esther to just give a final thoughts for today's program. And sorry, before you answer that, I just want to also share that, if audience, you have any questions and you think that there's a specifically some topics that we cannot deep dive today, please put them in the comments. Then we could actually organize other webinars in the future to deep dive in certain topics that you are interested. Sorry, Dr. Esther, please.
Yeah, thank you, Sherry. And I think I'm speaking on behalf of Bin, Clara, and Suchin. If I am highlighting the importance of these kind of webinars, coming together, sharing thoughts, and the arts are a magnifying glass to see the gifts in each person. I think when we start that, then and do not look at it as a comparison. Persons with disabilities, they see details, and often they see details we miss. Persons with dementia, I know, they remember songs we have forgotten. They remember smells we don't know, and this is where we need to look at. So I think we must be more kind, but that goes for everything, more focused on our community value and people. But I would like to end with two photos of people, of artworks of persons with a disability. One is for a young woman with Down syndrome, and the other one is of a young, now adolescent boy with autism. Now, the drawing with the boy with autism was done on an A4 sheet of paper, and it was displayed and enlarged. And if you just look at the immense amount of details what one child can put in one A4, then we only know what we miss out in detail. And if we look at the colors and really what this young lady with Down syndrome put in her flower, and especially the center part, they allow us to smell. And that is where I also come back to Nicholas' question. Museums have the power to bring back and to bring this to the community. And only then can we change attitudes, by seeing the gifts in each other, not the misbehavior. We all will have it. And let us remember that disability can happen to all of us at any stage of time. So I would like to thank you so much. Yes.
Oh, thank you for highlighting that. I think one key message that we can also take away from this webinar is be kind, to get to know each other more. And I think it also takes the community to come together, to work together to make the environment safer and more inclusive as well. And it is inspiring to be reminded that art can provide such privileged access to a person's special gift and life, regardless of age and background. So this brings us to the end of today's program. I hope our conversations have inspired, perhaps challenged, and taught us some important things about art and accessibility. I would like to thank all our panelists and also audience who are tuning in. Thank you for sharing and for your comments as well. And before we sign off, I would really appreciate if you could provide feedbacks on today's session. We are going to flash this QR code. There you go. So that you can conveniently scan or input a URL and let us know your thoughts. There are a lot of broad topics that we have uncovered today, but if there's any specific ones, if you want to deep dive, and put that in the comment section or in the remark column in the survey form. So thank you. Have a lovely weekend, and I hope everybody stays safe and well. Thank you. Bye.